Elara lived in a house where time seemed to have stopped, nestled on the edge of the banned tree forest. The mornings were born with the smell of wet soil and decaying leaves, a perfume that for others was a warning, but for her, it was an invitation. The walls of her small wooden cabin were lined with memories, faded photographs, and the ghostly presence of her late husband, Lazarus. He had been a strong and silent forest man who understood the secret language of the trees and animals they inhabited in it. It was his legacy, this deep and mystical connection, which now pulsed in Elara's veins, calling it to the green darkness. The elders in the village rippled their heads whenever they saw it look at the line of imposing trees. They told bull stories, a colossal creature of dark hair like night and eyes like burning embers. They said he was an ancient guardian, a monster who has not tolerated the human presence since the great tragedy that had taken so many, including Lazarus's father. The forest kept this pain, and the bull was its living manifestation, a constant reminder of the halter that stalled. But Elara listened to a different call in the winds of the wind that crossed the branches. It was not a threat roar, but a lament, a whisper of loneliness that echoed his own pain. She remembered Lazarus talking about the bull, not fearful, but with reverent respect, almost as if talking about an old friend. He had never told her all the truth, leaving pieces of a puzzle that only now did she feel the urgency to assemble. The longing for her husband to be mixed with this growing curiosity, a magnetic force that pulled her to the unknown. His heart, heavy by mourning, was a strange comfort in the idea of facing what everyone feared. The warnings were constant and came from all sides, painting paintings of horror and imminent disgrace. "The forest charges its debts, Elara," said the old baker, her eyes cloudy by the memory of her own brother, lost for decades in those woods. "The bull has no soul. It is pure fury of nature, a force that cannot be tamed or understood by us." The hunters, robust men who knew the dangers of the wild world, refused to approach the black tree edge. They talked about footprints as large as dinner dishes and a bunch that made his own floor shake, a sound that would jerk the blood. They said that the bull was the vengeful spirit of the forest itself, punishing the boldness of men who tried to explore it. For them, the creature was a symbol of the border that should never be crossed, a lesson recorded in blood and bone. Elara heard everything with serene patience, a sad smile to play on her lips as she thanked for her concern. But his words did not reach her. They were like stones thrown into a deep river, pausing only surface ripples. His conviction was older and stronger than their fear, for it was rooted in love and trust. She felt Lazarus's presence in every breeze coming from the forest, encouraging her, guiding her. Its mission was not of conquest or challenge, but of reunion, of closing a cycle that death had left open. She knew, with a certainty that she challenged the logic, that the bull kept the key to her peace. While the village saw a monster, she saw a call, a lost link with the man he had loved. Ignoring the call would be to betray his memory and his own soul. Elara's decision slowly matured like a fruit of autumn until ready to be harvested. She spent days preparing, not with weapons or traps, but with her heart open and her mind focused. He got the house, leaving everything in perfect order, as if prepared for a long trip from which he might not return. He folded Lazarus's clothes, inhaling his smell that still persisted in the fabric, a silent farewell of his ghost. He wrote a letter, not goodbye, but explanation, so that the village could one day understand his choice. In it, He spoke of the love that transcended life and death, and the silent promise he had made to her husband. A promise of not letting your story be told only by the fear and misunderstanding of others. She described the call she felt, the certainty that there was more in the history of the Taurus than the tragedy that everyone remembered. It was not crazy that guided her, but a deeper form of sanity, a loyalty to her own heart. The forest was not his enemy. It was the sanctuary where Lazarus's soul still danced with the wind. To meet the bull was going to meet his left, the wild, free, and misunderstood part. She felt that, when facing the creature, she would be honoring the indomitable spirit of her beloved. His journey would be a pilgrimage in the midst of a world that only believed in what he could see and play. He left the letter on the kitchen table, a silent testimony to those who found it. The sun was beginning to put on, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the perfect time to disappear. The night he left was a new moon, a veil of darkness that offered coverage and secret. Elara dressed in dark clothes. Her movements were quiet and deliberate, like those of a forest animal. It was only a small leather bag with a loaf of bread, a water canteen, and the old Lazarus amulet. It was a piece of polished frexwood with the shape of a spiral, which he claimed to be a symbol of cycle and renewal. When touching the amulet, he felt a chain of heat, a force that calmed the rapid beating of his heart. He took one last look at his house, a small island of light and heat in a sea of alarm of night. He was not afraid, but a strange sense of peace, as if he was finally fulfilling his destiny. The forest in front of him was a wall of black, but to her it looked like a portal. A portal to a place where the rules of the world of men did not apply, where magic was still real. Every step towards the trees was a step away from security and close to the truth. The air got colder, denser, loaded with the smell of pine and mystery. The sounds of the village disappeared, replaced by the cricket of the crickets and the distant PR from an owl. She was alone now, but she didn't feel lonely. She was accompanied by an invisible presence. The presence of the forest, which watched her, which evaluated her, which welcomed her in her dark and old breast. The call of the past was now an audible sound, a low melody that only his soul could hear. The forest floor was soft under its feet, a rug of leaves and moss accumulated over centuries. The trees rose like columns of an ancestral cathedral, their intertwined branches forming a dark ceiling far above. Darkness was not total. Stellar light cracks filtered out here and there, creating ghostly patterns on the floor. Elara moved with surprising familiarity, as if her feet knew the way of color. She trusted her instincts, the legacy of knowledge that Lazarus had left her, not in words, but in feelings. He felt the roots under the ground, the moisture in the air, the direction of the wind on his face. The forest was not a maze for her, but a living map that unfolded with each step. She knew she was being observed. She felt the weight of her eyes invisible on her back. It was not the eyes of ordinary predators, such as wolves or bears. It was something older, wiser. It was the guardian's own gaze, the bull who tested it, which means his courage and his intention. Elara did not falter, continued to advance with a quiet determination, her heart a constant drum. She didn't seek the creature. Let the creature find her to her. He knew the confrontation was inevitable, but he believed it would not be a confrontation of violence. It would be a meeting of two solidons, two souls who shared a connection with the same loss. The forest seemed to hold its breath around him in an expectant silence that preceded the crucial moment. The whisper of the past had become a clear murmur, guiding it into the heart of darkness. Over time, the forest became denser, wilder, more untouched. Elara felt the energy of the place to intensify, a vibration that roamed her body. It was a powerful primary energy that could crush a weaker spirit, but strengthened it. She recognized in this energy the essence of Lazarus, her brute strength and her hidden kindness. He loved this forest because he saw himself in his dangerous beauty and his majestic loneliness. To understand the forest was to understand the man she had lost, and it gave her a boundless courage. Suddenly, he stopped, his entire body on alert, all his senses sharply to the fullest. The air had changed, became heavy, loaded with a loud and strong smell, the unmistakable smell of a large animal. A low and guttural sound, he cut the silence, not a roar, but a deep resonant that vibrated in his chest. It was the sound of the bull, and it was close, very close, hidden in the shadows in front of him. She felt her massive presence, her contained strength, her cautious curiosity. This was the moment the village feared, the moment that had defined it as crazy in everyone's eyes. But in his heart there was no room for panic, only for deep calm and solemn anticipation. She was at home, in the most dangerous and most sacred place in her world. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and called for a name that had not been pronounced for a long time. Not the name Bull, but another, a secret name shared between her, Lazarus, and the creature of the forest. The name she whispered in the darkness was Kind, a name Lazarus had given to the creature in his youth. A paradox for a being of such power, but a name that contained the truth that only he knew. In response, the sound of a branch echoed in the silent clearing. Elara opened her eyes and saw him slowly emerging from darkness like a moving mountain. It was larger than any bull he has ever seen. His hair was a black velvet cloak that absorbed the low light. His horns were long and curved, polished as obsidian, formidable weapons capable of destroying anything in his way. And his eyes, which the villagers described like hell embers, shone with surprising intelligence, a melancholy light. The creature stopped a few meters from her, her hot breath to form clouds of steam in the cold air of the night. There was no fury in his gaze, there was no threat in his posture, just immense stillness and a palpable sadness. It was the look of those who waited for a long time, who kept a lone vigil for years. Elara stepped forward, his slow and deliberate movement, his hand extended in a gesture of peace. The bull did not move, he just watched her, his big head to lean slightly to the side, as if he studied it. She felt the connection to form between them, a bridge of silence and understanding about the abyss of difference. This was not the blind beast of legends, the thirsty blood monster of the horror stories. It was an ancient soul, a sense-mounted being imprisoned by his own legend and the pain of the past. The call that had brought her here was his call, a request for liberation and company. Elara continued to advance, one step at a time, her heart to beat a pace of trust and not fear. She spoke to him low, the same soft voice she used to calm Lazarus in her nightmares. "I know," she whispered. "I know you're alone. I'm too. He left us both, didn't he?" His words hovered in the air, loaded with an empathy that the creature seemed to understand perfectly. The bull released a soft snort, a cloud of warm air that touched her face, and the smell of the earth and the moss intensified. It was a gesture of recognition, acceptance, an invitation to get closer. Finally, she was close enough to touch him, her hand hovering for a moment over her massive muzzle. He hesitated for a moment, not out of fear, but for reverence for the holiness of that moment. Then, with a delicacy that contrasted with the immensity of the creature, his fingers touched the ruff. A wave of emotions ran her, not only his own, but also his, in an overwhelming torrent. He felt his overwhelming loneliness, his unshakable loyalty to Lazarus, his pain for the misunderstanding of the world. He felt his confusion in the night of the tragedy, his attempt to protect and not destroy, an interpreted act that condemned him. Silent tears began to roll through Elara's face, tears of mourning, relief, and deep connection. The gentle bull leaned his huge head against his body, a gesture of comfort and sharing of pain. They were like this for a long time, a woman and a beast, two souls of loneliness finding comfort in each other. The whisper of the forest had finally become a clear conversation, a communion of spirits in the heart of the night. The memory of the tragedy was fire in the history of the village, a wound that never healed completely. It happened 30 years ago, at a time when the ambition of men led them to challenge the limits of the Black Tree Forest. Led by Lazarus's father, a stubborn and proud man, a group of lumberjacks decided to explore the noble woods from the interior of the forest. They ignored the ancient tales, the legends whispered by the elders over the guardian of the forest. They believed they were just stories to scare children, superstitions of a forgotten time. Lazarus, at the time a young boy, begged his father not, feeling a terrible premonition. He already knew the bull, had by chance in his childhood and formed a secret and silent connection with the creature. He knew that Gentle was not a monster, but a territorial and protective being who would not tolerate invasion and destruction. His father laughed at his fears, calling him weak and dreamer, and departed with his men at dawn. The promise that Lazarus had broken this day was the promise he had made himself to protect his friend from the forest. He could not convince his father, could not prevent the greed that moved them, and felt powerless. This impotence has become a guilt that haunted him for the rest of his life, a shadow in his gaze. He knew what was going to happen, felt him in the bones, but his voice was not heard. The village remembered the sound of the trees to fall, followed by a deadly silence and then a roar that shook the mountains. A roar of pain and fury, the sound of a betrayed guardian and a nature to complain about what was his own. The broken promise was not only from Lazarus, it was from humanity itself, which broke the pact of respect for the savage. The few survivors who returned, injured and terrified, told a story of chaos and blind fury. They spoke of a black shadow that moved between the trees with the speed of a ghost and the strength of an earthquake. They described the bull not like an animal, but as a force of nature, a devil of hulls and horns. They said that he attacked unjustly, destroying his camp, crushing wagons and men with equal fury. His words painted the image of an irrational beast, a crazy monster, cementing his place in the folklore of the village as a symbol of evil. No one questioned his version of the facts. Fear and pain were too great to allow any other interpretation. Lazarus's father was among the dead, and the blame was entirely on the creature of the forest. From that day, the Black Tree Forest became a cursed place, a territory of which no one approached. The bull passed from legend to taboo, his name pronounced only in frightened whispers. Lazarus, however, carried a different and heavier truth in his heart, an invisible scar. He knew that the men had caused the bull's fury by overthrowing the ancestral tree, the heart of the forest. Gentle does not attack for evil, but in desperate defense of his sacred home, an act of protection and not of aggression. He tried to explain, tried to share his knowledge, but his voice was drowned out by the choir of mourning and revenge. His youth and his strange connection with the forest made him suspicious in the eyes of some. He was forced to silence his truth, to live with the distorted version of the story, which deepened his pain. The broken promise to protect his friend became a wound that he shared silently with the lone bull. The promise that Lazarus had made Elara years later was one day to reveal to him the whole truth. He spoke of her in the moments of greater intimacy, when the defenses of his heart lowered under her kind touch. "One day, my love, I will take you to the forest and introduce you to the true king of Black Tree," he said. "Not the monster of the stories, but an old and noble soul that carries the weight of a great injustice." He described Kind not with fear, but with a deep, almost fraternal admiration that fascinated Elara. His words painted a completely different image of the creature, one that spoke of loyalty and loneliness. He promised him that together they would break the fear spell that involved the forest and restore the honor of his guardian. It would be his final act of redemption, the cure for the scar he carried since his childhood. But time, this silent thief, stole this opportunity, taking Lazarus before he could fulfill his word. His sudden death left his promise suspended in the air, an unfinished piece of the symphony of his life. Elara clung to this promise like a castaway to a board of salvation, became her raison d'être. It was the last connection she had with him, his last mission, a will of his love and his confidence in it. The village's warnings were empty echoes against the resounding force of that promise to fulfill. She was not disobeying them, she was obeying him to the last desire of the man he loved. His journey to the forest was not only for his own peace, but for his peace to complete what he could not. The promise broken by death would finally be honored for the love that survived. Lazarus' scars were not just emotional. He carried a physical brand of that fateful day. A long scar on his left hand, which he said he won when trying to prevent his father from the first axe blow to the ancestral tree. His father had pushed him to the side, and his hand had slipped into the sharp blade, a small blood sacrifice that hastily would follow. He showed the scar to Elara, tracing the white line with his finger, as if he read a story in Braille. "This brand," he said, "it's my constant reminder of that day, from my failure to protect the two." The two referred to his father and his friend, Gentle, both victims of the same greed and misunderstanding. He felt that he had failed both, unable to save one of his stubbornness and the other from his justified fury. This duality of his pain was something that the village could never understand, because they only saw one side of history. For them, there were heroes and villains, victims and a monster, a simple narrative for a complex tragedy. Lazarus lived in the complexity, in the gray space between light and shadow, which isolated him even more. Elara was the only one who saw the depth of his soul, the only one with whom he shared the burden of his truth. She kissed the scar on her hand, a gesture of acceptance and sharing of her pain. He promised her that her truth would not die with him, that she would carry her and honor her. Now, in the darkness of the forest, next to the creature who shared the same invisible scars, Elara felt the weight of this promise. It was a sacred weight, a responsibility that filled it with strength and on purpose. Tora's memory for the village was a memory of violence and loss. They remembered the bodies that were recovered, the devastation of the camp, the terror in the eyes of the survivors. His scars were collective, a shared phobia that was transmitted from generation to generation. The children were taught not to approach the forest, to fear the shadow between the trees. The bull became the local boogeyman, the incarnation of all its fears of the unknown and the savage. The story has simplified itself over time, losing the nuances and details until it became a simple tale of morality. Moral was clear: not challenging nature, not giving gone, not venturing out beyond what is safe. The forest has become a border, not only physical but also psychological, a limit to its curiosity and courage. They sacrificed a part of their world in exchange for a sense of security, imprisoning themselves in their own fear. Elara, as she walked into the forest, was breaking not only a taboo, but also the currents of this collective fear. She carried the memories of Lazarus, a counterattack on the official history of the village. She remembered her descriptions of a curious young calf who approached him without fear. The way they shared the silence, sitting side by side, a boy and a wild creature, in perfect harmony. He remembered the pain in Lazarus's eyes as he described how his friend had been transformed into a monster for the misunderstanding of men. These were the memories that guided her, the scars of his soul that she now sought to heal. His search was not only for a bull, but for the lost truth, for the story that had been buried under layers of fear. Lazarus's promise was a seed he had planted in Elara's heart, a real seed. For years, she watered this seed with her memories, with her unshakable faith in her character. While the village cultivated fear, it cultivated hope, the hope that redemption was possible. She knew that fulfilling the promise would be dangerous, not necessarily because of the bull, but because of what it would represent. It would be a direct challenge to the collective memory of the village, an act that would be seen as betrayal or madness. She would be disturbing the fragile peace they had built on a convenient lie. But fear-based peace is not true peace. It is just a prison with invisible walls. Lazarus's promise was a key to this arrest, and Elara was determined to use it. She owed it to him, herself, and the lonely creature she expected in the forest. His journey was an act of radical love, a refusal to let the narrative of fear be the final word. She knew that what she would find in the forest could shock her, but she was prepared to face any truth. After all, true love does not move away from scars, but seeks to understand and cure them. Elara felt that, when she found kind, she would be touching Lazarus's scars one last time, and in doing so, it might finally start to heal their own wounds, the wounds of loss and longing. The promise was not a burden, but a compass, pointing the way home to the heart of truth. And the heart of truth was in the darkness, waiting to be rediscovered. The narrative of the village about the broken promise was that of humanity breaking its pact with nature. But Lazarus's story was more intimate, more personal, that of a boy who could not protect his friend. It was this second story that propelled Elara, the personal pain overcoming the collective tragedy. She understood that the great stories are made of small pains, from broken or fulfilled individual promises. The scars that mattered were not the ones that the village displayed with fear, but the ones Lazarus had guilty. It was by these scars that she was now walking under the dark canopy of Blacktree. She was closer to her husband than at any time since her death, as if walking in her footprints. The forest was not just the bull home. It was the home of the spirit of Lazarus, of its indomitable essence. He was present in the smell of the earth, the sound of the wind, in the imposing presence of the trees. And his promise was not a distant memory, but a living presence, pushing her forward. Each step was an act of faith, a refutation of fear that had kept the village hostage for 3 decades. Elara did not carry a gun, but carried a truth, and the truth was the most powerful weapon of all. She was about to rewrite the story, not ink, but with courage and compassion. The broken promise was about to be patched, and the scars of memory would finally have a chance to heal. The silence of the forest was the silence of a well-kept secret, a secret that she was about to unravel. When facing the bull, Elara did not see the beast of legends, but Lazarus's lost friend. He saw the embodiment of his guilt and pain, the silent witness of the tragedy. The creature was not the cause of the broken promise, but its other victim, condemned to a life of loneliness and misunderstanding. His eyes contained malice, but an ancient wisdom and a deep sadness that mirrored his own. In her gaze, she saw the reflection of the young Lazarus, the boy who had tried to stop the catastrophe. And he saw the reflection of herself, the woman who now tried in vain to fill the void left by him. The bull and it were both sides of the same mourning coin, linked by the same man. The broken promise was not a barrier between them, but the bridge that united them. By extending her hand to touch the creature, she was not just keeping Lazarus's promise, she was forging a new one. A promise that the truth would be finally known, that their loneliness would end. The scars of the past could not be erased, but they could be understood and accepted. And in this understanding, there was the possibility of peace, a peace that both Lazarus and Gentle deserved. Elara felt the weight of the years falling from the creature's shoulders to her touch, a silent sigh of relief. His presence was not an invasion, but a return, the closing of a circle that had been left open for too long. The story was far from over, but there in the dark clearing, a new chapter was beginning to be written. Elara's heart was beating like a war drum, a constant and challenging rhythm against the oppressive silence of the forest. Each step in darkness was an act of rebellion, a statement that his love was stronger than collective fear. The old and imposing trees seemed to bend over it, their branches as skeletal fingers pointing to the forbidden path. The village had been left behind, a cluster of trembling lights that represented safety and ignorance, and she didn't look back. His journey was not an escape, but a search, driven by an obstinacy born of pain and devotion. Their heart, which many would find out, was actually forged in an unbreakable force for the fire of loss. Lazarus had taught him to read the forest, to understand his subtle language, and now she used this knowledge as a map. The moss on the north side of the trees, the flight pattern of the night birds, the smell of the earth that indicated the proximity of the water. She was not an intruder in those domains. She felt like she was returning to a place her soul already knew. The shadow that moved between the trees was not only that of the legendary bull, it was also the shadow of its own determination. A shadow that refused to be determined by the ghosts of the past or the warnings of the present. His stubborn heart did not see monsters, the mysteries to be unraveled, truths to be revealed. She knew that the way would be lonely, that she would face the stranger at her own risk. But loneliness did not scare her, because he carried with him the constant company of Lazarus's memory. His voice echoed in his mind, not with warnings, but with encouragement, guiding his steps in the darkness. The forest was her sanctuary, and she was determined to find her lonely god. With each meter that advanced, the air became denser, more charged with a primordial energy. It was like diving in a deep ocean, leaving the surface world behind and entering a different kingdom. A kingdom ruled by older laws than humanity, where instinct and intuition were worth more than reason. Elara felt a presence to observe her, a vast and silent intelligence that evaluated her from the shadows. He was not threatening, but inquisitive, as if the forest herself were testing the purity of her intention. His stubborn heart responded to this test not with arrogance, but with a resolute humility. She was not coming to conquer or desecrate. She came to understand and to connect. The sounds of the night were a symphony around him, the pyre of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the understock, the worse away from the wind. But under all this, there was a deeper silence, a silence that belonged to the shadow she sought. The shadow of the bull, an absence of sound that was more eloquent than any noise. She imagined him to move in parallel to her, a dark and massive way to slide effortlessly for the rugged terrain. He didn't fear him. He felt a strange affinity for that lonely creature, both misunderstood by the outside world, both carrying the burden of a tragic past, both defined by a single story told by others. His stubborn heart recognized an equal in the silent resilience of the guardian of the forest. She was not hunting a monster. She was looking for a soul brother in loneliness. His search was a mirror of his, a journey towards the center of his own being. The village's warnings echoed in your mind, not as impediments, but as a fuel for your determination. He will destroy you, Elara. It's a blind force of nature, the blacksmith shouted, his red face of worry. No human being came back from a date with him, the old weaver had whispered, his eyes full of genuine feather. Their voices were the voices of reason, logic, fear that rules the lives of most people. But Elara's heart operated at a different frequency, a frequency in tune with love and mystery. She knew that what they described was not the bull, but their own fear projected into a creature. They saw a beast because it was easier than confronting the complex truth of their own guilt in the tragedy. It was easier to blame a monster than to admit that the greed of the father of Lazarus had triggered the catastrophe. His stubborn heart refused to accept this simplification, this convenient lie. She walked not only by herself and by Lazarus, but for the truth, a truth that the village refused to see. The shadow between the trees was the guardian of this truth, and she was determined to hear her from the source. His stubbornness was a form of loyalty, a loyalty to a story that deserved to be told correctly. She felt like an archaeologist to dig a lost city, removing the layers of earth and time to reveal the original structure. The forest was its excavation place, and the shadow that moved was its most precious artifact. With each step, he felt more alive, more faithful to herself and in all the years she had passed in the safety of the village. Obstination, which others saw as a failure, was actually their greatest strength. Suddenly, he found something that made her stop, her heart jumping in her chest. A footprint, printed in the soft mud next to a stream, so large and deep that it seemed impossible. It was the mark of the shadow, the physical proof of its existence and its magnitude. Anyone else would have retreated to terror when you see such a sign, a clear warning of the approaching power. But Elara knelt down, her stubborn heart to fill her not with fear, but with a reverent admiration. He drew the outline of his footprint with his fingers, feeling the strength that had created it, the heavy presence that had left that mark. It was not the mark of a monster. It was the mark of a king in his own kingdom. She looked forward to the darkness from which the footprint had come, and felt her determination to solidify himself as steel. He was on the right track. He was approaching the heart of the mystery, the center of the maze. The shadow was no longer a distant figure in his imagination. It was a tangible reality that awaited it. He got up and continued his walk, now with an even more focused purpose. He was no longer only guided by Lazarus's memory, but also by the signs left by the creature itself. It was as if the bull was leaving a trail, an invitation to his most intimate sanctuary. Perhaps the shadow was also tired of loneliness. Perhaps it would also seek an end to her long exile. Elara's stubborn heart clung to this possibility, this hope of a mutual encounter. The forest seemed silent than ever, as if all its inhabitants arrested their breath, waiting for what would follow. The woman and the beast were on a collision route, not violence, but of destination. The moon peered through the clouds, bathing the forest in a silver and ghostly light. The light revealed the austere beauty of the place. The moss-covered trunks shined like velvet, the featherses looked like delicate lace. But it also accentuated the shadows, making them deeper, more mysterious, fuller of possibilities. Elara felt that the border between her world and the creature's world was becoming increasingly sized. Her stubborn heart did not know borders, just bridges, and she was determined to build one. She thought in Lazarus, the way he could move between the two worlds so easily. He belonged to both the village and the forest, a silent ambassador between civilization and the wild. Now this role fell on it, and she felt the weight and honor of that responsibility. The shadow that moved between the trees was its counterpart, the other ambassador. Together, perhaps they could mediate a peace that had been broken for a long time. She stopped by a clearing, feeling that the end of her search was near. The air was still, heavy with a palpable anticipation, the kind of silence that precedes a storm or revelation. She closed her eyes, concentrating, trying to feel the presence. She knew how to be close. And then he heard him, a low, resonant sound that was not a roar, but a sigh of such deep and so old loneliness that it made its own heart hurt in sympathy. He opened his eyes and saw him, the shadow taking shape on the other side of the clearing. It was a vision that would have frozen the blood of any other human being. The creature was a mountain of muscle and dark, its closed silhouette against the moonlight. His horns were like two silver scythes, and his eyes seemed to contain galaxies of an ancient sadness. But Elara's stubborn heart did not see a monster. He saw the creature of Lazarus's stories. He saw the kind, the loyal friend, the misunderstood guardian, the lonely soul. He was still, observing it with an intensity that penetrated to his soul. There was no aggression in his posture, only a vigilant stillness, cautious curiosity. He was not the shadow. It was the substance behind it, the truth behind the legend. Elara felt a wave of emotion to dominate her, a mixture of relief, admiration, and deep sadness for her loneliness. Slowly, very slowly, she stepped into the lightning brightness of the moon. It was a step of faith, a step through the abyss of fear and prejudice that separated them. The bull did not move, his massive head leaning slightly, as if he recognized it in any way. Perhaps he would feel Lazarus's spirit in her, the same aura of respect and lack of fear. Elara's stubborn heart guided her, telling her not to show hesitation, to show only confidence and empathy. She continued to walk, her fixed look at his, establishing a silent communication. A communication that said, "I'm not afraid. I came in peace. I came to hear." The distance between them diminished, the space carried from a tension that was not of danger, but meaning. Each step of Elara was a word in a sentence she was composing, a phrase of reconciliation. The shadow was no longer among the trees. It was in front of him, real and overwhelming. But her magnitude did not intimidate her. On the contrary, she was attracted to her as a planet by her star. He was the center of this universe that was the forest, and she was a traveler who had finally reached her destination. Her stubborn heart, who had taken her to there against all the warnings, now beat with a serene calm. She had found what she was looking for, not a monster to defeat, but a soul to find. The bull released a low buffet, the sound vibrating in the air, and she saw in her no fury eyes, but recognition. It was as if he were waiting for her, as if she knew that one day someone would come. Someone with the courage to see beyond their fearsome appearance, beyond their terrible reputation. Someone who carried the smell and spirit of the only human friend he had ever had. Elara stopped a few meters from him, his hand rising up instinctively, not to defend himself, but to connect. The shadow between the trees had revealed, and in his presence, Elara's stubborn heart found her purpose. His challenged journey had become a moment of sacred communion. The silence was broken by the sound of his own whisper, pronouncing the name Lazarus had taught him, gentle. The creature's reaction to hearing his secret name was subtle but deep. A tremor ran through his massive body, and his big head lowered a little in a gesture that seemed almost submission. His eyes, once filled with a vigilant sadness, now shone with a light of surprise and hope. He had taken a hesitant step ahead, the floor shaking slightly under his weight. The shadow that had terrified the village for 30 years was now showing unexpected vulnerability. Elara's stubborn heart was right. Under the fearsome appearance, there was a soul that longed for connection. She kept her hand extended, an offer of confidence that he seemed to understand perfectly. The moment seemed to extend to an eternity, a suspended moment in the time where two worlds touched. The woman who challenged all the fears and the beasts that incarnated them were about to redefine their story. She did not feel the triumph of courage, but the humility of recognition. He recognized in him the loyalty that Lazarus had spoken, the pain of injustice, the loneliness of exile. And he somehow seemed to recognize in her the love and compassion that was the legacy of his lost friend. The stubborn heart does not fold before fear, bends before the truth. And the truth, that night enlightened by the moon, was that the greatest monster was not the creature of the forest, but the ignorance that had condemned it. Her stubborn journey had led her to the heart of darkness, just to find out she was full of unexpected light. Under the emerald leaves, illuminated by moonlight beams that filtered themselves as heavenly spotlight, the reunion happened. It was not a reunion of words, for their language was older and deeper. It was a conversation waged in silence, stillness, mutual recognition of two souls marked by the same loss. Elara, with her still extended hand, watched the great bull gently approaching slowly. Every step was deliberate, heavy but devoid of any threat, loaded with an almost shy hesitation. It was the movement of someone who didn't know the kind touch a long, long time ago, perhaps since the days when Lazarus was a boy. Its immense figure no longer looked scary, but deeply tragic, a monument alive to loneliness. The dark darkened over powerful muscles, and the steam of his breath created ghostly halo to the moonlight. Elara felt her own heart to calm down, synchronous with the slow and powerful rhythm of the creature. She did not retreat when he finally came close enough that his massive muzzle would touch his extended palm. The contact was electric, a chain of emotions and memories flowing between them. His hair was rough and hot, and underneath, the vibration of immense and powerful life was felt. She felt her surprise, her unbelief, her immense and overwhelming wave of relief. He was not alone. His long vigil was finally over. Someone had come. Someone who didn't hold a gun, who didn't shout from terror, who didn't see him like a monster. Someone who had whispered his real name, the name that binded him to his past of innocence. Elara closed her eyes, absorbing the torrent of feelings that came from him, a form of pure communication without filters. She saw through her eyes fragments of memories he shared with her. He saw the image of a young Lazarus, laughing as he offered him an apple, his little hand touching the same muzzle without fear. He saw the beauty of the forest through his eyes, a sanctuary of peace and vibrant life, his sacred home. He felt his confusion and panic on the day of tragedy, the deafening sound of the axes biting the meat of the ancestral tree. He felt his pain, not fury when he invested, not to kill, but to ward off the desecrators, to protect the heart from his world. He saw the distorted image of his own reflection in men's terrified eyes, the way his act of defense was interpreted as a malicious attack. And he felt his longe and loneliness when Lazarus, his only friend, never returned to visit him. He did not know that Lazarus had been prevented, that he had carried this guilt for the rest of his life. He had thought that he had also abandoned him, which had made his loneliness even bitter. Elara's tears were freely dripping now, mingling with the harsh bowl, tears for her pain, the pain of Lazarus and her. The silent reunion was a catharsis, a sharing of burdens that were too heavy to be carried alone. She stroked her muzzle, whispering words of comfort, trying to convey all the truth. "He didn't leave you," she murmured. "He never forgot you. He loved you, kindly." The creature released a low, deep sound, a lament that contained 30 years of misunderstood sadness. The bull, in turn, seemed to read Elara's soul with the same clarity. He felt in her the unmistakable presence of Lazarus, not just as a memory, but as an essence. He felt his deep love for him, the same unshakable loyalty he had felt himself. He recognized in her the same quiet force, the same courage that did not need to be announced. He leaned his massive head against her shoulder, in a gesture of such deep confidence and vulnerability that he cut his breath. The weight of his head was immense but comforting, an act of total delivery. He was trusting his life, his story, his wounded soul. They were so embraced in the moon-illuminated clearing, a fragile woman and a colossal beast. But in fact, they were both equally strong and equally fragile, mirrors of each other. Under the emerald canopy, the boundaries between human and animal, between legend and reality, have dissolved. There were only two living beings to find comfort in each other after a long and painful separation. Elara smelled him, a burning odor to the earth, the rain, the leaves, and old vitality. It was the smell of the forest itself, the smell of the lost world of Lazarus. Inhaling that smell was like inhaling her husband's own essence, and she felt a peace she had not felt for years. The reunion was not only hers with the bull, it was also a reunion with the part of herself that had died with Lazarus. In the presence of that magnificent creature, she felt whole again. The silence between them was filled by an understanding that transcended the words. Elara understood the true nature of the tragedy, the waterfall of fear and misunderstanding that had led to the condemnation of Hentil. And Cain seemed to understand the purpose of Elara's coming, his mission of fulfilling a promise and seeking peace. He was not a monster, he was a victim. Like Lazarus's father had been a victim of his own arrogance. Lazarus had lived and died in the middle of these two tragedies, trying in vain to reconcile them. The silence between them. Now this task of reconciliation fell on Elara, and she accepted her with all her heart. She knew that the world outside, the village, could never understand the scene that unfolded in that clearing. They would see only one woman hugging her own killer, the monster who had brought them so much pain. But the truth was infinitely more complex and more beautiful. The truth was that love and empathy could create bridges about the deepest abyss of fear. The bull moved away slightly and looked at her with his old, wise eyes. Then he turned and took a few steps toward the darkness of the forest, stopping to look back. It was a clear invitation, a gesture to call it to follow him. He had something to show him, something that was part of Lazarus's promise, something that would complete the circle. Elara did not hesitate, her heart full of new confidence and renewed curiosity. The silent reunion had ended, and a new phase of his journey was about to begin. Elara followed the massive shadow of Kind through the night forest. He moved with surprising grace to his size, his hooves to find silent support on the soft floor. She followed him closely, feeling completely safe in her presence, as if walking beside the most powerful guardians. The trees seemed to make their way to him, their branches to move away as if they revered him. The forest was no longer a place of fear. It was a kingdom, and she walked beside her king. He guided her by ways that no human being had stepped in decades to the deepest and sacred heart of Black Tree. The air became increasingly pure, more vibrant with a vital energy that made its tingling skin. She felt she was approaching a place of great power, a place of meaning. He remembered Lazarus's words on the ancestral tree, the heart of the forest, the place that men had desecrated. Was it there that Gentle was taking her? To the crime scene, the epicenter of the tragedy? Her heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. What would you find there? A dead stump, a reminder of destruction, or something else, something that had survived, something that Gentle had kept secret all these years? The silent reunion had only been the prelude. The real revelation was yet to come. And she trusted her unlikely guide to take her to her, to the final truth that Lazarus wanted her to know. His faith was absolute, forged at the time of contact in the silent sharing of his souls. The walk ended in an even larger clearing, a natural amphitheater bathed by a strange and smooth light. In the center of the clearing, there was no dead stump, as she female. There was something much more extraordinary, something that made your chin fall in amazement. The ancestral tree, or what was left of it, its massive trunk cut a few meters from the ground, was alive. Not with leaves and branches, but with an inner light, a soft, pulsating luminescence that emanated from its wood. And around it, growing from its exposed roots, a perfect circle of young trees in freshu. Her silver leaves shone in the light of the mother tree, as if they were their children to watch over it. It was a vision of a beauty of another world, a miracle of resilience and renaissance. Gentle stopped by the circle of trees, his head down in reverence. Elara approached slowly, feeling the heat and peaceful energy emanating from the place. He then understood the true nature of the role of Kind. He was not just the guardian of the forest, he was the guardian of that sanctuary, that hope. For 30 years, he had protected this miracle from rediscovery, keeping everyone away. His fury was not just to protect the tree, but to protect its rebirth. The silent reunion under the emerald canopy had led her to this sacred place, the deepest secret of Kind and Lazarus. She felt her husband's presence there more strongly than ever, as if her soul was intertwined with the light of the tree. Elara touched the trunk of the ancestral tree, its surprisingly hot and vibrant surface. The light intensified with her touch, and she felt a wave of peace and understanding to flood it. He saw the image of a dying Lazarus, not in his bed, but here, in this clearing, years before. He had not died of a sudden illness as everyone thought. In one of his secret visits to see Gentle, he had been caught in a thrub, mortally injured. Gentle had found him and brought him to this place, his large body to protect him. In his last moments, Lazarus had touched the mother tree, and somehow his essence, his life force, was founded with her. He had not truly died, had transferred his energy into the heart of a forest, helping her to heal. That is why his body had never been found in the forest, as his friends from the village recovered him from home. But his soul, his true essence, had been here in this secret sanctuary. His promise to take her to meet the king of the forest was literal. He wanted to bring her to this place. I wanted to show him that death was not the end, but a transformation. The silent reunion was not just kind, out with Lazarus himself in his new form. Tears of joy and astonishment rolled through her face as she finally understood the complete truth. His mourning has become a wonderful acceptance, a deep joy. Gentile watched her, her wise eyes to reflect the light of the tree, and she saw in them not sadness, but contentment. He had brought his friend's companion home. He had faithfully kept the secret and sanctuary for all these years, waiting for this moment. Elara turned to him and hugged his massive neck, burying his face on his hair. "Thank you," she whispered, the words muffled by her emotion. "Thank you for taking care of him." The bull released a soft, soft sound, a sound of peace and duty to be fulfilled. The silent reunion had culminated in this extraordinary revelation, a more beautiful and more magical truth than he had ever imagined. She had not lost her husband. He was everywhere around her, in the light of the tree, in the breath of the wind, in the eyes of her faithful guardian. She sat on the clearing floor, leaning against the hot trunk of the tree, and Gentle lay beside her. His huge head rests on his lap, a gesture of comfort and company. They stayed there together, the three, a family gathered under the emerald canopy. Elara knew she would never return to the village, the world of fear and half-true. Her place was there, in the heart of the forest, with his transformed love and his loyal guardian. Her reunion had not been an end, but a new beginning, the beginning of a life she had never dreamed of being possible. What followed in that enlightened clearing was what shocked everyone, although there was no one there to see. Revelation was not a noisy or violent event, but a silent and deep transformation that redefined the boundaries of life and death. While Elara was sitting, leaning against the pulsating ancestral tree, with kind head on her lap, the light began to intensify. It was not a blinding light, but a hot, golden brightness that seemed to emanate from inside the wood itself. The light enveloped them, to her and the kind, in a hug of heat and pure energy. Elara felt a feeling of lightness, as if the weight of her physical body is dissolving. His mourning, his pain, his longing, everything has become a sense of peace and absolute belonging. The hidden truth revealed to him, that the soul of Lazarus was founded with the tree, was only the first layer of the mystery. The unexpected revelation was what happened next, a miracle fabric from the love, loyalty, and ancient magic of the forest. Golden light began to coalesce, form patterns and shapes in the air in front of him. They were not hallucinations. They were as real as the tree against his back and the harsh one under his hand. She saw images of her life with Lazarus to dance in the light, her happiest moments, her shared sorrows, her silent promises. It was as if the tree, the soul of Lazarus, was showing him all his love, reaffirming his connection beyond the grave. Gentil watched the show with a reverent calm. His eyes blinked slowly, as if he already knew what was about to happen. He was not just a guardian, he was a priest in this sacred temple. The golden light intensified further, and from the heart of the ancestral tree a figure began to take shape. It was not a solid form, but an appearance of light and memory, the unmistakable silhouette of Lazarus. He smiled at her, the same crooked smile she loved so much. Her eyes shine with the same golden light of the tree. He did not speak with words, but his message came to her with crystal clear clarity, directly in his mind and heart. "You are always on your way," said his silent voice. "I knew I would find the way to me." The hidden truth was that his death had not been an end, but a transition to a new form of existence. He had become part of something larger, the protective spirit of the forest, intertwined with his life force. The unexpected revelation was that he could manifest, that his conscience was still intact, preserved by the magic of the place. Elara reached out, and her light hand found hers, and though she felt no flesh, she felt her essence. He felt his love, his joy to see her, her gratitude for having the courage to challenge everything to find him. Tears ran through Elara's face, but they were no longer sad. They were such a profound joy that hurt. Her husband was not lost, was found in a deeper and more miraculous way than he had ever dared to dream. Gentil dropped a soft snort, and a sound of contentment, his duty finally fulfilled in his entirety. He had gathered not only his friend's wife and memory, but his living souls. Lazarus's appearance of light turned to kind and placed a translucent hand in his massive head. The connection between them was visible, a stream of light flowing between the spirit and the beast, a friendship that transcended the kingdoms. Elara then understood the total depth of her connection. Gentil was not just Lazarus's childhood friend. He was his familiar, his twin soul in the animal world. His loyalty was not just a duty, it was a reflection of the deep love that united them. The hidden truth was that Lazarus had never been truly alone after his transformation, for Gentil had remained with him. The symbiotic nature of its existence. Lazarus, as a spirit of the tree, gave the Gentil purpose and spiritual company, and kind, as a physical guardian, protected the sanctuary from Lazarus, allowing its essence to bloom in peace. They were two halves of a whole, the civilized and the savage, the spirit and the flesh, to keep the balance of the forest. Its story was not a tragedy, it was an epic of friendship and sacrifice. Elara felt humble and privileged to witness such a sacred truth. She was not an intruder in this relationship. It was the missing piece, the third vertex of her triangle of love and loyalty. His arrival had completed the circle, bringing the missing human love to balance the equation. She was the bridge between the worlds she had left behind and this kingdom of magic. The light began to fade slowly, Lazarus's appearance to become more terminated, to be reabsorbed by the ancestral tree. His smile remained to the end, a promise that he would always be there, even if invisible. Her final message to her was choosing. You can stay, my love, and to share this life with us, or you can return, taking the truth to you to heal the fear of your people. The unexpected revelation was not just what she found, but the choice she now faced. A choice between your personal happiness in this rediscovered paradise and your duty to the community that you had judged it badly. The hidden truth she had discovered had the power to free the village from her fear of 30 years. He could teach them that the forest was not a place of monsters, but of miracles. He could rehabilitate the name of Gentil, turning him from demon into a hero. But that would mean leaving this sanctuary, leaving the tangible presence of Lazarus and the company of Gentil. It would mean returning to a world of skepticism and misunderstanding, where its history might not be believed. It would be your sacrifice, your own act of love to a world that might not deserve it. She looked at Gentil, whose wise eyes watched her, not influencing her, but offering any silent support for her decision. And he looked at the pulsating tree, feeling Lazarus's love to envelop her, to give her the freedom to choose. The village, however, was at stir. Elara's disappearance had been discovered at dawn, his letter found on the kitchen table. The panic and the certainty of his death spread like a fire. A search group, against his common sense and moved by guilt, graduated on the edge of the forest, but none of them dared to enter. They looked at the tree wall, imagining the horrors that unfolded inside. His imagination, fueled by 30 years of horror stories, painted a picture of his death in the hands of the bull. They cried for her, for their madness, for their refusal to hear their warnings. His absence confirmed his narrative, solidifying the monster's legend, deepened his fear. The hidden truth of its survival and its miraculous discovery was beyond its understanding. The unexpected revelation for them would be their return, or their eternal silence. They didn't know that while they mourned their death, she was more alive than ever. They did not know that the beast that had killed her was actually lying peacefully by her side. The irony of the situation was overwhelming. The distance between its reality and hers was an abyss. The shock that awaited them would not be that of his death, but that of his life and the truth she brought with her. Her return, if she chose it, would not just be the return of a woman, would be the collapse of her entire belief system. Elara spent the rest of the night and the next day in that sacred clearing, in communion with the spirits of the place. She did not need to eat or drink. She was nourished by the energy of the tree and the genteel company. He pondered his choice with his heart and soul, weighing his personal desire against the greatest good. Staying would be easy. It would be a refuge, a reward deserved for your courage and your love. To leave would be the hardest way, a path of confrontation, skepticism, and loneliness of a different kind. The hidden truth he had discovered was as much a burden as a blessing. Carrying it alone would be easy. Sharing it with an incredulous world would be its greatest trial. She thought of the children of the village growing up with the same fear that she had paralyzed her parents. He thought of the elderly, living their lives limited by an invisible terror border. He thought of the memory of Lazarus's father, a man whose greed had caused the tragedy, but whose history could serve as a lesson instead of just a horror tale. And he thought of Gentil, who deserved to be seen not as a monster, but as the noble guardian he was. The unexpected revelation did not only belong to her, belonged to all of them. His personal happiness could not be built on the continuous ignorance of others. Lazarus had not sacrificed to create a private paradise, but to save the heart of the forest to the world. The decision was made at dusk on the second day, a decision born of the altruistic love he had learned from Lazarus. She would return, not out of obligation, but out of compassion. He got up, his body to feel strong and revitalized, his clear and resolute mind. He knelt and kissed the trunk of the ancestral tree, a silent but not final farewell to Lazarus's soul. "I will come back," she promised in thought, and felt a wave of love and approval in response. Then he turned to Kind and hugged him with all his strength, burying his face on his last time. "Come with me," she whispered. "Not to the village, just to the waterfront. Let them see. It was a huge risk. Your appearance together could cause panic and violence. But it was also the only way to break the spell, to provide undeniable proof that could not be ignored. The revelation had to be visual, shocking, transformative." Gentile looked at her, and in her old eyes, she saw her agreement, her confidence in her. He would get up and be by his side, his partner in this final mission of redemption. The hidden truth was about to be revealed to the world. And the following shock would be the sound of a 30-year fear paradigm to shatter. Together, they started the long return walk, the woman and the beast moving as one. The morning light was beginning to filter through the canopy as they approached the edge of the forest. Elara could hear the voices of the search group, voices full of despair and resignation. Her heart was beating hard, not of fear, but of nervous anticipation. This was the moment of truth, the moment when its private revelation would become a public spectacle. She took a small luminescent flower that grew near the ancestral tree, a small piece of its magical shine. It was his only proof, beyond his word and the presence of his unlikely partner. He took a deep breath, feeling the calm strength of Gentile behind him and Lazarus's loving presence inside him. She was not alone. She carried all overpower and the magic of the forest. The hidden truth was in his heart, and the unexpected revelation was about to get out of the shadows. She left the tree line and entered the morning light, standing proud and unharmed. And behind her, the massive shadow of Gentile emerged, not like a monster, but as a king accompanying his queen. The silence that followed was absolute, the collective sound of dozens of hearts to stop at once. And this silence was the true beginning of the shock. The shock on the edge of the forest was as palpable as a glass wall. The faces of the villagers, previously circumvented by pain and guilt, froze in a mask of unbelief and primordial terror. There was Elara, the woman they had cried as dead, standing, radiant and serene in the morning light. And behind her, the creature of its worst koshmara, the bull, not attacking it, but remaining as a loyal guardian. His massive presence was overwhelming, but his stance was of a noble calm that contradicted all legends. No one shouted, no one ran. The shock was so deep that he paralyzed any reaction. His brains struggled to process an impossible image that broke all the rules of his universe. Elara took a step forward, her calm being the most powerful force in the clearing. "He is not what you think," she said, her clear and firm voice cutting the tense silence. "Your name is Kind." The name, so incongruous with his appearance, stopped in the air, another impossible piece in this puzzle. She lifted the luminescent flower she had brought, and her light, and from another world captured the look of all. "The forest is not a place of death," she continued. "It's a place of renaissance. Lazarus didn't die as they think. He's there." She told them the story, all of it, the hidden truth she had discovered in the heart of the forest. He spoke of the ancestral tree, the greed that had caused the tragedy, the act of defense of Gentile and not malice. And he spoke of the transformation of Lazarus, his soul to merge with the tree, his sacrifice to heal the wound. His words were so fantastic, so magical, that they should have been received with derision. But the proof was there, alive in front of him, the unharmed woman, the peaceful beast, the bright flower. The peace found in the farewell was not that of Elara da Floresta, but that of the village of his own fear. As Elara's words settled, fear in the villagers' faces began to be replaced by something else. First, the confusion, then the astonishment, and finally, a slow and hesitant wave of understanding. They looked from Elara to Gentile, and for the first time, they didn't see a monster, but the creature she described. They saw sadness in his eyes, his loyalty to Elara, his silent nobility. The bull legacy, which had been a legacy of terror and death for 30 years, was being rewritten before his eyes. He was becoming a legacy of loyalty, sacrifice, and tragic misunderstanding. An old hunter, who had lost his brother on that fateful day, stepped forward, tears running down his wrinkled face. We didn't know," he stammered, his voice embargoed by the emotion of decades. "We blame him for everything." It was the first slit in the fear dam, the first admission of guilt. Others followed, murmurs of repentance and shame to spread throughout the crowd. His pain did not disappear, but his target has changed, moving away from the creature and turning inside to his own story. They understood that they had been prisoners not of a bull, but of their own simplistic narrative. Elara knew that healing would be a long and difficult process, but the first step, the most crucial, had been given. The peace she had found in the clearing was now starting to spread her seeds in the soul of the village. Elara did not return to live in the village. Her place was no longer there. She became the bridge, the ambassador between the two worlds, as Lazarus was before her. He lived on his old house on the edge of the forest, but spent his days inside, with kind and the spirit of Lazarus. The villagers, over time, learned to accept the new reality, their transformation of crazy widow into wise guardian. They began to approach the forest, not with axes and fear, but with respect and curiosity. They brought fruit and grain offerings, leaving them on the edge as a silent apology to their guardian. Some, the bravest, accompanied Elara in small raids, learning from her the language of the forest. She taught them to see the beauty where they once saw only danger, to find peace where they once only felt terror. Taurus' legacy has completely transformed itself from a horror story to scare children into a legend of redemption and hope. Gentle became a symbol not of fury, but of resilience and forgiveness, the noble king who had forgiven his ignorant people. The peace found in the farewell was the farewell of the old order, the old way of thinking. The village and the forest, long separated by fear, began a slow process of reconciliation. The terror border has dissolved, replaced by a mutual respect threshold, and all because of a woman who refused to believe in the story everyone told. Their obstinacy had saved them to all. Over the years, Elara has aged. Her skin was wrinkled, but her eyes never lost the shine of wisdom. She became a legend for her own right, the woman of the forest, the bullmate, the bride of the spirit of the tree. The children of the village no longer feared the forest. They sought it, listening to their stories of magic and rebirth. She led them to the waterfront, and sometimes kind appeared at a distance, a magnificent view that no longer inspired fear, but admiration. He was the living proof of his story, the silent guardian who confirmed his truth. The legacy of the bull was now the legacy of Elara and Lazarus, a love story that transcended all the barriers, a story that taught that courage is not the absence of fear, but the action despite it. He taught that the truth is often more complex and more beautiful than the simple stories we tell ourselves. and he taught that death is not necessarily an end, but it can be a transformation. The peace found in Elara's final farewell many years later was serene and natural. On a full moon night, she last walked to the ancestral tree clearing. He lay down at its base, with the head of Kind on his lap, and simply fell asleep. His soul, freed from his aged body, joined with Lauren in the light of the tree, the two becoming one. The light of the tree shone more intensely than ever that night, a headlight of full love. The village found his body the next morning, a peaceful smile on his face. They didn't cry sadly, but with reverent joy, because they knew she was home. They buried their body on the edge of the forest, at a place where the village and nature wept, their tomb becoming a sanctuary. Gentle continued his watch, now keeping the souls of both friends. He was seen more often, a comforting presence in the landscape, a living memory of the legacy they left. The bull's legacy was now eternal, woven into the very identity of the village. They were the people who lived in harmony with the forest, the people who had been forgiven by their guardian. The peace found in his farewell was not an end, but the solidification of a new era. An era of understanding, respect, and belief in magic. The story of Elara and Gentle was told with each new generation, not to warn, but to inspire. To inspire people to question their certainties, to face their fears, and to seek the truth behind the shadows. Their courage had changed their world forever. Time passed, and the forest flourished, the village flourished, and the story became legend. Travelers from distant lands came to see the peaceful forest and to hear the history of the woman and the bull. They came to see Gentle, the ancient king, who still wandered his domain, a vision of majesty and peace. He was the last living witness of the miracle, the guardian of a love that had become eternal. His legacy was proof that even the deepest wounds can be healed, that forgiveness is possible, and that peace can be found even after the greatest tragedy. The peace that Elara found was not just for herself, it was a gift she gave everyone. When saying goodbye to her mourning and fear, she opened the door for others to do the same. His reunion in the forest had not only saved his soul, he had saved the soul from his community. The shock she had caused to return was the medicine they needed, bitter but necessary. And the legacy of the bull, once a symbol of division, became the symbol of its unity. Final peace was the restored balance, the complete circle. When Gentil finally reached the end of his long days, he did not die alone in the depths of the forest. He walked slowly to the clearing of the ancestral tree and last lay down at his base. The tree, which contained the souls of Elara and Lazarus, pulled with a bright golden light. The light involved the body of the great bull, and slowly his massive body dissolved, not powder, but in particles of light. The particles were absorbed by the tree, and their light became triune, three united essences as one. The guardian had finally joined those he had kept, his loyalty rewarded with eternal union. The bull legacy was now complete, and its missing physical form, but its spirit forever present. The peace found in his farewell was the final rise, the transcendence of the physical to the purely spiritual. The ancestral tree has become a place of even greater pilgrimage, a lighthouse of love, loyalty, and friendship. And its light, visible miles away on clear nights, was a constant reminder of its history. The story of how an obstinate heart and unshakable love could rewrite reality. The final legacy was not about a bull, a woman, or a spirit in a tree. It was about the power of empathy to overcome fear. It was about the courage to look at what everyone fears and see not a monster, but a misunderstood story. Elara, as she walked to the forest, was not just looking for her past, she was forging a new future for everyone. The peace she found was the peace she created through an act of radical love. And the legacy of the Taurus, in the end, was simply this: love is the most powerful magic of all. It is the force that can heal wounds, reconcile enemies, and transform death into life. The final farewell of the story is not a farewell, but an eternal lesson. A lesson that echoes in the wind that whispers through the leaves of the black tree forest. A lesson that sometimes, to find peace, one must walk straight into the heart of what is most fearful, and find out that, after all, there was nothing to fear. What leads a woman to challenge the appeals of her entire village and to venture into a forbidden forest? For Elara, it was a memory, such a powerful bond that it lavished the line between man and the beast. Everyone warned her that the bull was a monster, an embodiable creature of fury that had already brought the tragedy once. They spoke of danger, madness, certain death. But they did not know the truth, hidden in the depths of the forest, a secret that Elara and the bull had kept for decades. When she finally stood before him, disrespecting all the warnings, what unfolded was not the tragedy that everyone predicted, but such a profound revelation that would undermine her understanding of love, loss, and the very nature of the soul. What did she find in the heart of the forest that shocked everyone?